Hello everyone, Jules here. Today I'd like to talk about some esoteric books, and these esoteric books are going to be about one particular topic, and that is the topic of Gnosticism. Now, I wanted to talk about these books today because I haven't spoken about Gnosticism before in regard to spirituality, and I have shown some other esoteric books on my channel before, but I haven't shown and talked about books about Gnosticism. So the first one is Gnostic Philosophy by Tobias Churton, and the subtitle is From Ancient Persia to Modern Times. So here's the book, and this is a really good book. Don't let the title throw you off. A lot of people will see the word philosophy and think, oh, that sounds a little bit too difficult for me. Philosophy is really a system of ideas and concepts. So if you just think of philosophy as ideas and concepts, then you don't have to be a bit overawed with the word philosophy. And Gnosticism is a very early form of esoteric philosophy, and particularly esoteric Christianity. And it does go way back to the ancient Persians, who had some of the very earliest concepts of God. So Gnosticism has not only influenced tarot and spiritual ideas, spiritual systems, it has also influenced Kabbalah, and particularly Christian Kabbalah, and particularly esoteric Christianity. So this is a great book. This covers the whole history, or most of the history of Gnostic ideas. And when I say Gnostic ideas, I mean quite a varied and long history and quite a various number of Gnostic groups. And Gnosticism can mean different things too. It generally means inner knowing, but it can also mean different ideas and different concepts that belonged to different early and ancient groups of people who had very different ideas of their own concepts of God and spirituality. And this book goes right back to the ancient Persians and up to modern times, as the subtitle says. Tobias Churton has written a number of books on esoteric subjects. He has written a really detailed book on Rosicrucianism, which is a separate book. There is a chapter in here on Rosicrucianism as well, because Rosicrucianism and Christian Kabbalah and Hermetic Kabbalah, there's a chapter on Crowley in here. All of those things were a big influence on the Golden Dawn and how the tarot decks were created by the Golden Dawn members and ex-members, particularly Waite, particularly Arthur Waite, and particularly Crowley, with their own decks. So if you can get some of the ideas behind those decks, and you can see just how far back this goes, it's very interesting. The book on Rosicrucianism by Tobias Churton is not as accessible as this book. This book is really quite accessible, and because there's a different chapter on different topics and different time periods, it's very good in that way, because you could read particular chapters that you're interested in rather than reading it from cover to cover. You don't have to do that. And I think it's a very well-written book, and I think it's a book that's very informative because it actually describes these ideas in a clear way, because Gnosticism is actually such a broad area. A lot of people think that the Gnostics were one group in one period of time, but they actually weren't. It was actually a range of different groups with different ideas, including the Knights Templar, for example. There's a chapter here about the Knights Templar as well. And so there's a whole range of different groups with different ideas over a long period of time. So it wasn't just one group in one particular period of time. So this is a really good book. Gnostic Philosophy by Tobias Churton. And this is pretty easily available. The next book is for people who particularly want to find out more about Gnostic scriptures. Now this ties in with the Dead Sea Scrolls. This book is written by Bentley, Layton, and this is the hardcover version. You can get this in paperback, and it has quite a different cover. This hardcover version is out of print now. The paperback version has a bit of a strange cover. Well, one of them does. The cover may have changed since then, but I did have the paperback version at one stage, and I decided to get the hardcover version years ago instead. But it did have a strange, unusual cover that didn't quite fit in with the title. I just thought I'd mention that. It's the one with the blue cover. So if you see that one and think the cover artwork looks a bit unusual or strange, the book is definitely worth getting. This is probably the best book that's ever been written about Gnostic scriptures. And Gnostic scriptures are those particular books that were contained in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were found in about 1947. And these particular books were not included in the Bible. And these scriptures go back to the Essenes group that Jesus was most likely a member of, the Essenes. And my favourite gospel, for example, from these types of scriptures is the Gospel of Thomas. Now, this book is probably the only one ever written that gives a great outline of all the different books and Gnostic scriptures that are known and who wrote most of them. It's the only book that's ever been written that has clearly laid out, book by book, what they were basically about, what they are basically about, what time period they are from, who wrote them. There's great ancient maps in here as well to give you a bit of an idea of time periods. It's, as I said, the best book that's ever been written on Gnostic scriptures. And this is a great reference book for anyone who's really curious about Gnostic scriptures and the way they were written, and particularly why they are different and why they are so unusual, and why these particular books were not included in the Bible. At the time that the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, a lot of these scriptures were already known about and by biblical scholars, and by the time the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, they did find some extra scriptures as well, but a lot of them, or some of them, were actually already known about, but they seem to have been deliberately withheld from the Bible because they were mystical, they were seen as being different or a bit strange, and there was a type of censorship that went on by the main church at the time, which was the Catholic Church, which was the very first Christian church that was ever founded. The very first Bibles were Catholic Bibles, and the biblical scholars and Catholic clergy decided that these books were not to be included in the Bible, and it was really a type of censorship about the S.C.Ms in particular, because anyone who looks at the Gospel of Thomas particularly will be able to see that the types of sayings of Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas, for example, are far more esoteric than the Gospels and writings that are in the Bible. So there seems to be, and I would think a lot of people would agree, that there was a withholding of Gnostic scriptures in the Bible for a reason. So this is a great book, if you can get this in paperback, for people who are interested in Gnostic scriptures. The Gnostic Scriptures by Bentley, Layton. And as I was saying, you would need to get the paperback, most likely, of that one. Now, the next one, the last one I'm showing, is important. It's one of the few books that has been written on Gnostic Tarot. This is Gnostic Tarot by Irwin, and the subtitle is Mandalas for Spiritual Transformation. This is a great book. Irwin is a very well-respected academic who is an expert on comparative religion and spiritual philosophy, or esoteric philosophy in a way. And this book was written a number of years ago. I'm pretty sure it's still available. It would have a different cover. It was published by Weiser. This is not your average tarot book. It's not. It's written in an accessible way, but it is such a spiritual book that this book has not got the same approach as probably any other tarot book, because it is Gnostic tarot. It is written from a Gnostic spiritual perspective. So for every card in here, there is a small black and white picture. There is an upright and reversed meaning, and most importantly, there is a Gnostic interpretation for each card, for all 78 cards. And at the back of the book, there are special spreads by Irwin that he devised for contemplation. He actually calls them mandala spreads. So they're not for divination really at all, not really. They are for spiritual development and contemplation. So this is a really deep book. So I have got a number of books that are very spiritual and quite deep, but because this is Gnostic in approach, this is probably the deepest tarot book that I have. And I think it's probably going to be the most spiritual book around written about tarot, because it is from the Gnostic perspective and using tarot for spiritual development and contemplation. So this is a very unique book. But I wanted to include this with my Gnostic books today because it is the only one that I have seen that is particularly Gnostic in its approach. And I wanted to discuss Gnosticism books, but I wanted to include this because it is the only one that I think is available that combines Gnosticism with tarot. So those 3 books are really worth getting, or any of those 3 books, and I'll put the details below the video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.